Have you ever noticed that when certain women walk into a room, everything shifts? They have not said a word yet. They have not made an entrance. They are not the loudest person there, and often they are not the most beautifully dressed. But something in the room reorganizes itself around them, and people find themselves wanting her attention without quite understanding why. Most people assume it is beauty, or expensive clothes, or perfect makeup, or that she simply has that thing some women are born with and the rest are not. Psychology says something entirely different, and it is far more useful. What you are responding to when you feel that pull is not her appearance, it is her relationship with herself. It is a specific set of internal habits that show up in her posture, her voice, her timing, and the way she handles the moment when something goes wrong. And here is the part that matters most to you. Not one of those habits is something a woman is born with. Every single one of them is learned. Today, I am going to walk you through 10 of them. And I want to be honest about something from the start, because there are a lot of videos on this subject that get the entire premise wrong. This is not about becoming a woman other people rank highly. That is exactly the wrong direction. And you will notice that half of these habits are specifically about ceasing to be governed by other people's opinions. This is about becoming a woman who knows her own worth so completely that she stops negotiating it with anyone. The magnetism follows from that. It never comes first. And stay with me until the very end, because the 10th habit is the one everything else rests on. Without it, the other 9 become performance. With it, they become who you actually are. But before we begin, I want to ask something of you, and please actually do it, because it makes this whole thing better. Go down to the comments right now and answer this. Which of these 10 do you already have, and which one do you know you need most? Be honest about both. The one you already have, because most women dramatically underestimate what they have already built. And someone reading needs to hear that it is possible. And the one you need, because naming it out loud is genuinely how the work begins. And then, and this is the part that matters, scroll down and read what others wrote. Find someone whose answer sounds like your own life and reply to her. Tell her what helped you, or simply tell her you are in the same place. Because women learn this from other women far more effectively than they learn it from anyone else, and that comment section can be one of the more useful rooms on the internet if you decide to make it one. And do me 2 more kindnesses. Leave a like and subscribe with notifications on, because that is how this reaches the woman who needs it and does not know it exists yet. And if this content brings real value to your life and you would like to support the work directly, consider becoming a member of the channel. Membership is what allows me to keep researching, writing, and producing these videos every single week. And every member genuinely makes a difference. Whether you join or not, you are welcome here, and I am glad you came. Now, let us begin with the first habit, which is the foundation everything else is built on. The first habit is that she does not let her emotions drive. You have seen the opposite of this 1,000 times. Something goes wrong. Someone says something cutting. A plan collapses at the last minute, and a person reacts instantly at full volume, saying things that will require 3 days of repair work afterward. She does not do that. Something goes against her, and there is a pause, not a long one, a breath. In that breath, she takes in what actually happened, separate from how it felt, and then she responds from a place that is still hers. Psychology has a name for this. It is called emotional regulation, and it is one of the most reliable predictors of both success and well-being that has ever been studied. And I want to be very precise about what it actually means, because it is constantly misunderstood. Emotional regulation is not suppression. It is not pretending you are fine. It is not swallowing anger until it comes out sideways 3 weeks later at someone who did not deserve it. Women who do that are not regulated, they are storing. Real regulation is this: you feel the thing fully and you choose what to do with it. The anger is there, She knows it is there. She is not lying to herself about it. But there is a space between the feeling and the action. And in that space, she gets to decide. That space is the entire skill. Everything else is detail. And here is why this creates the presence you noticed at the beginning of this video. An unregulated person is predictable and controllable. If raising your voice makes her raise hers, you now have a handle on her. If a cutting comment sends her spiraling, anyone in the room can move her at will. A regulated woman has no handle, and people can feel the absence of that handle, though they cannot name it. What they experience is composure, but what they are actually detecting is that they cannot operate her from the outside. Now, how do you build it? Practically, it begins absurdly small. The next time you feel the surge, whatever the surge is, do not act for 60 seconds. That is the whole practice at the start. Not calm down, not be reasonable. Simply do not act for 60 seconds. Most reactions we regret happen inside the first 10. And notice something honestly. The situations where you have the least control are almost never with strangers. They are with the people closest to you because they know exactly where the handle is. That is not a failure. That is simply where the work actually lives. And there is one more thing about this habit that almost nobody mentions, which is what it does over the long term. Women who react instantly tend to spend an enormous amount of their lives repairing, apologizing for what was said in heat, rebuilding a relationship that took a hit during one bad evening, managing the aftermath of a message sent at midnight. A regulated woman simply has far less wreckage to clean up, and that is not a small efficiency. Across a decade, that is thousands of hours and a great deal of emotional energy that stays available for her actual life rather than being spent undoing damage. People often assume composure is about looking dignified. It is really about not spending your years in repair work. And a woman who is not controlled by her own reactions is naturally the same woman who is not controlled by other people's expectations, which brings us to the second habit. The second habit is that she knows how to say no, and she is not ashamed of it. For a great many women, this is the hardest one on the entire list, and there is a reason for that, which has nothing to do with personal weakness. Most women were trained from childhood to be accommodating. Be nice. Do not make a fuss. Do not be difficult. Think of others first. And the training worked, which is precisely the problem. An entire generation of women learned that saying no makes you selfish and that being liked requires being available. So they say yes to the favor they do not have time for, to the visit they are dreading, to the extra work nobody else volunteered for, to the relationship that ended emotionally 2 years ago. And every yes that should have been a no takes something out of her. The woman with self-respect says no, politely, warmly, often, but firmly, and without the long apologetic explanation that invites negotiation. And notice that last part, because it is where most women lose the ground they just gained. The over-explanation is the tell. When you say no and then produce 4 reasons why, you have unconsciously submitted your decision for approval. And any competent person can dismantle 4 reasons. But nobody can argue with a sentence. I cannot do that. Thank you for thinking of me, but no, that does not work for me. Complete sentences. No appendix. Here is what almost nobody tells you about the moment you start doing this. Some people will be upset. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they had an arrangement with you that they liked, and you just changed it without consulting them. That reaction is not evidence that you made a mistake. It is often the clearest evidence that the boundary was overdue. And here is the deeper thing I want you to sit with. Every no is a yes to something else. Every hour given away resentfully is an hour not spent on your health, your work, your rest, or the people who genuinely matter to you. Saying no is not the withdrawal of generosity. It is the direction of it. Start with something small this week. One thing you do not want to do that nothing serious depends on, and decline it in one sentence. Notice that the world does not end. And a woman who is no longer spending her energy on obligation has a great deal more of it available for something most people never learn to do, which is the third habit. The third habit is that she speaks less and listens more. Watch her in a group and you will notice something. She is not competing for airtime. She is not waiting with visible impatience for her turn. She is not preparing her response while someone else is still talking. She is actually listening. And this is far rarer than it sounds. Most conversation is not an exchange, it is two people taking turns performing. Person A talks while person B constructs their reply. Person B talks while person A does the same. Almost nobody is genuinely receiving. Psychology is consistent on this point. The more perceptive a person is, the more they observe before they participate. Because she is listening rather than rehearsing, she picks up things others miss entirely. The hesitation before an answer, the subject someone keeps steering away from, the thing that was said once and quietly meant a great deal. She is not gathering ammunition, she is gathering understanding. And then, when she does speak, something interesting happens. People listen. Because her words are infrequent enough to be noticed and specific enough to be useful, she is not adding volume to the room. She is adding something to it. This also explains her relationship with two things that consume enormous amounts of most people's lives: pointless argument and gossip. She does not argue to win. If someone is not genuinely open to changing their mind, she recognizes it early and stops spending herself on it. That is not avoidance, it is arithmetic. And she does not participate in gossip. And here is the practical reason rather than the moral one. Everyone in the room is quietly aware that a person who dissects the absent will eventually dissect them. Her silence in those moments is registered by everyone present as safety, even if nobody says so out loud. Now, the honest caution on this habit: listening more than you speak is powerful. Disappearing is not. There is a version of quietness that is presence and a version that is fear, and the difference is whether you say the true thing when it matters. If you have opinions you never voice, that is not this habit. That is something else, and it deserves attention rather than praise. Practically, try this in your next conversation. Ask one more question before you offer your opinion. Just one. Watch what surfaces that would never have surfaced otherwise. And a woman who is genuinely listening rather than performing is usually a woman who has stopped needing something specific from the room, which is the fourth habit. The fourth habit is that she does not run on other people's approval. It is entirely human to want to be appreciated. Nobody is above that. And any video that tells you to stop wanting recognition is selling you a fantasy. But there is an enormous difference between enjoying praise and requiring it. Watch what happens to a woman who requires it. She checks how a photograph performed. She replays a compliment that felt lukewarm. She changes an opinion when the room seems to disagree. She chooses the option that will be admired over the option she actually wants. And underneath all of it runs a constant, low-level question: what do they think of me right now? That question is exhausting, and it is also expensive because it means her sense of herself is stored outside of her body, distributed among people who are barely paying attention. The woman we are describing keeps hers internally. She can hear criticism without collapsing. She can hear praise without inflating. She can make a decision that nobody understands and remain settled about it. Not because she is arrogant, but because she has already done the evaluation herself, and she trusts her own assessment more than the crowd's. And here is where this becomes genuinely powerful, and where the magnetism at the start of this video actually comes from. A woman who needs approval is, without intending it, asking everyone she meets for something. And people feel that ask, even subtly. A woman who is not asking anything of the room is free to simply be in it. There is nothing to give her and nothing to withhold from her, and that is a very unusual thing to encounter, which is why it registers as presence. The practical version of this is smaller than you might expect. Do one thing this month that nobody sees, not shared, not mentioned, not posted, something entirely for you. Notice how strange it feels to do something valuable without a witness. That strangeness is the measure of how much of your life has been performed rather than lived. And a woman who stopped auditioning for the world's approval naturally becomes far more selective about who is in her life, which is the fifth habit. The fifth habit is that she is extremely careful about who she keeps close. Her circle is small, not because she is unfriendly, and not because she has trouble connecting, because she has learned what proximity actually costs. There is a well-known idea in psychology that you become an average of the people you spend the most time with. Whether or not you take that literally, the underlying observation is undeniable. The emotional atmosphere you spend your hours in becomes your baseline. Spend enough time with people who complain, and you will find yourself complaining. Spend enough time with people who are ambitious and steady and honest, and something in you will rise to meet them. So she treats her inner circle like something that requires maintenance, because it does. And this means she removes people. Quietly, usually, not with a confrontation, not with a speech. She simply becomes less available. The person who is consistently negative, the one whose humor is always at someone's expense, the one who competes with her rather than celebrating her, the one who reappears only when something is needed. She does not stage an ending. She stops feeding it, and it ends. And she stays very far away from drama, which is worth defining precisely. Because everyone uses the word, and few people mean the same thing by it. Drama is conflict that is not intended to be resolved. It is a fight that exists because someone enjoys the fight. The moment she recognizes that pattern, she disengages, because there is no outcome available and therefore no reason to spend herself on it. Now, the honest caution here, and it is important, because this habit has a shadow that people rarely name. There is a difference between curating your circle and disposing of people at the first disappointment. Every real relationship contains disappointment. The people who love you best will occasionally misunderstand you, fail you on a specific day, and be less than you needed. If your standard removes everyone who does that, you will end up with an extremely peaceful life and nobody in it. The honest test is this: when you have ended a relationship, did that person know why? Because if the answer is consistently no, then what you have may not be discernment. It may be an exit strategy that activates before intimacy can occur. Curate genuinely, but give people one honest conversation before the door closes. There is also something worth saying about how a small circle actually feels from the inside, because people imagine it as lonely, and it usually is not. When you stop maintaining 15 shallow relationships, an enormous amount of time and attention returns to you. The people who remain get considerably more of you than they would have otherwise, and they notice. And there is a particular quality to a friendship where nobody is performing, no updates for the sake of updates, no obligation to attend things, long gaps that mean nothing, and then a conversation that picks up exactly where it left off. Most people never experience that because their relational energy is spread so thin that no single connection ever gets deep enough to become effortless. And a woman who has taken responsibility for who is in her life has usually taken responsibility for something much larger, which brings us to the sixth habit. The sixth habit is that she does not live in a victim mindset, and she owns her failures out loud. Let me be extremely careful with this one, because it is the habit most easily distorted into cruelty, and I want to say the true version rather than the popular one. Some people are genuinely victimized, Terrible things happen to good people through no fault of their own, and telling someone in that situation that they simply need a better mindset is not wisdom. It is cruelty with a motivational font. That is not what this habit means. What this means is her orientation after something goes wrong. Whatever happened, whatever share of it, was genuinely not her doing. Her attention moves relatively quickly to a single question: what part of this is mine, and what can I do from here? Because the alternative, and I want you to see this clearly, is not moral superiority. The alternative is powerlessness. If everything that happens to you is entirely the fault of circumstances and other people, then you have secured your innocence at the cost of your agency. You are blameless, and you are also stuck, because nothing in your own control is contributing, which means nothing in your own control can change it. She would rather have the power than the innocence. So when she fails, she says so, out loud, plainly, without a performance of self-flagellation and without a defense attorney's summary of why it was not really her fault. That was my mistake. I misjudged that. I should have handled it differently. And notice what that does to a room. Most people cannot do it, and the inability to admit fault is one of the most reliable signs of insecurity there is. A woman who can say plainly that she was wrong is telling everyone present that her sense of herself does not depend on being right, which is precisely the trait people find so difficult to look away from. She also treats failure differently in a mechanical sense. Where most people ask, "What does this say about me?" she asks, "What does this teach me?" The first question produces shame, and shame produces paralysis. The second produces information, and information produces movement. And a woman who treats her own life as something she can influence naturally invests in the instrument she is going to influence it with, which is the seventh habit. The seventh habit is that she invests in herself continuously, and I do not mean shopping. There is a version of self-investment that has been marketed to women very heavily and is largely about appearance and consumption. New clothes, new products, treating yourself. None of that is wrong, and enjoying beauty is a genuine pleasure. But it is not what we are talking about. And confusing the two has cost a great many women a great deal of money and time. What she invests in is capacity. She reads, not necessarily constantly, but consistently. She learns things she does not need to learn. She develops skills, sometimes practical ones, and sometimes entirely useless ones that simply interest her. She keeps her body functioning, not because of how it looks, but because she intends to use it for another 40 years. She protects her sleep. She takes her mental health seriously rather than treating it as an indulgence. She understands something most people never fully absorb. Her mind and her health are the only assets she will carry through every single chapter of her life. Money can vanish, relationships change, jobs end. Her capacity to think, to learn, to adapt, and to physically function is the one thing that travels with her regardless. And there is a compounding effect here that is easy to miss. A woman who reads 20 pages a night is not a slightly better read woman in a year. Over 10 years, she becomes a fundamentally different person from who she would otherwise have been, and the difference is enormous and almost entirely invisible while it accumulates. The practical version is genuinely modest. 20 minutes a day, reading, learning, or moving your body, not 2 hours. 20 minutes on most days for years. That is the entire mechanism, and it is available to almost everyone. And a woman who has invested in her own capacity is in a far better position to handle the eighth habit, which is one of the most sensitive on this list. The eighth habit is that she pays attention to her own financial life. And I want to handle this one with real care, because the standard advice on this topic excludes an enormous number of women unfairly. If you spent 25 years raising children and running a household, you did not fail at financial independence. You were doing work that made everything else possible, and the fact that it was unpaid is a failure of how our societies count value, not a failure of yours. If you are widowed, or your health limits what you can earn, or you are in a season where independent income simply is not available, none of that reflects on your worth or your intelligence. So let me define this habit in a way that is actually true for every woman watching. It is not necessarily about earning your own salary. It is about not being financially blind. Here is what that means practically. She knows where the money is. She knows what comes in and what goes out. She knows what accounts exist, what debts exist, and where the documents are kept. She participates in the decisions rather than being informed of them afterward. If something happened tomorrow, an illness, a death, a separation, she would not be starting from zero information at the worst moment of her life. And that last point is not theoretical. It happens constantly. A great many women discover the true state of their household finances at the exact moment they are least equipped to handle it, in the middle of grief or crisis, and the disadvantage is severe and often permanent. Financial awareness is not a lack of trust in a partner. It is basic self-preservation, and any partner worth having will understand that immediately. And where independent income is available to her, she values it. Because it does something specific, it means her decisions can be made on their merits. She can leave a job because it is wrong for her, not stay because there is no alternative. She can address a problem in a relationship rather than tolerate it because the exit is financially impossible. Money does not buy happiness, but a lack of options can absolutely buy misery. Practically, this week, find out one number you do not currently know. Just one. What is actually in the account? What the debt actually totals? What the insurance actually covers? Awareness begins with a single number, and every woman watching can find one. And a woman who is not trapped by circumstance is far better equipped to be generous safely, which is the ninth habit. The ninth habit is that she is genuinely compassionate, and she does not destroy herself with it. She is not cold. This is the misconception that follows women with these traits everywhere, and it is completely wrong. She will listen to your pain for an hour. She will give you her honest opinion when it would be easier to give you a comfortable one. She will show up when things are difficult, and she will remember to check on you 3 weeks later when everyone else has forgotten. But there is a line, and she holds it. If someone brings her the same problem for the 5th time, having taken none of the steps discussed the previous 4 times, something shifts in her, not into judgment, into recognition. She recognizes that this person is not seeking a solution, they are seeking an audience for the situation, and she will not spend herself indefinitely on that. This distinction is one of the most useful things in this entire video, so let me make it plain. Supporting someone means helping them carry something while they work through it. Being drained means carrying it for them while they do not. The first is love. The second is a slow transfer of your life into someone else's crisis. And it usually ends with you exhausted and them exactly where they started. And she has learned something that takes many women decades to accept. Her peace is not an acceptable payment for someone else's comfort. She can care about you enormously and still not be available at 11 at night for the 4th night running. Those two things are not in conflict, though a person who is used to unlimited access will often insist that they are. Watch how she does this, because the method matters. She does not deliver an announcement. She does not accuse. She simply becomes less available and offers what she genuinely can. I love you and I cannot do this tonight. That sentence contains both the love and the limit, and it is one of the most useful sentences a woman can learn. And every single habit we have discussed, all 9 of them, rests on something underneath. Which brings us to the 10th, the one I promised, and the one that holds up everything else. The 10th habit is that she is not afraid to be alone. This is the foundation. And if you remove the other 9 and kept only this one, most of them would eventually rebuild themselves because this is where they come from. She can spend an evening entirely alone and be genuinely fine, not enduring it, not distracting herself through it. Fine, she can eat a meal by herself in a restaurant. She can take a long walk with nothing in her ears. She can sit in a quiet house with her own thoughts, including the uncomfortable ones, without needing to escape them. And this matters far more than it appears to, because look at what it does to everything else. A woman who fears being alone cannot say no, because no risks abandonment. She cannot hold a boundary, because the person might leave. She cannot end a relationship that is harming her, because the alternative is a silence she cannot bear. She cannot be indifferent to approval, because approval is her evidence that she will not be discarded. She cannot curate her circle, because she needs the numbers. Fear of solitude quietly cancels every other habit on this list. And the reverse is equally true. A woman who is genuinely at peace alone becomes almost impossible to control because the primary tool used to control people is the threat of withdrawal. If you cannot be threatened with aloneness, an enormous amount of leverage over you simply evaporates. She holds her own happiness. Other people add to it. Nobody is holding it hostage. Now, I want to say something important here because this is where these videos usually go wrong. There is a difference between being at peace alone and having given up on connection, and they can look identical from the outside. This habit is not about not needing anyone. Human beings need each other. That is not a weakness to be trained out of you. And any philosophy that tells you otherwise is describing damage rather than strength. The research on loneliness is genuinely serious, and prolonged isolation harms both mind and body. The distinction is this: she does not need anyone to fill an emptiness. She still wants people, deeply, and she chooses them. The difference between choosing someone and needing them is the difference between a relationship and a dependency, and everyone involved can feel which one they are in. So the practical work is not to withdraw from people. It is to become someone whose own company is genuinely good company, so that every relationship in your life is there by choice rather than by necessity. And that is where the magnetism actually comes from. Because a woman who does not need the room is entirely free to enjoy it, and that freedom is visible from across the space. So there they are, 10 habits. She does not let emotion drive. She says no without shame. She listens more than she speaks. She does not run on approval. She curates who is close to her. She takes responsibility rather than assigning blame. She invests in her own capacity. She keeps her eyes open about money. She gives generously without emptying herself. And she is entirely at peace in her own company. Now notice what almost none of them are. Not one of these is about appearance. Not one is about money in the sense of having a great deal of it. Not one is about being impressive or admired or envied. Not one requires you to be born a particular way or to be young or to have had a fortunate start. They are all internal, and every single one of them is a practice rather than a trait. Which means the honest answer to the question this video's title asks is this: you do not become this woman by deciding to be her. You become her by doing one of these things repeatedly until it is no longer a decision. And that brings me to the most important thing I will say today. Do not try to do all 10. That is the fastest possible route to doing none of them. 10 simultaneous changes collapses within 2 weeks, every single time, and then the collapse itself becomes evidence that you cannot change, which is worse than not starting. Pick one. Pick the one that made something in your chest tighten while you were listening, because that reaction is information. Run it for a month, not perfectly, just repeatedly. And when it has stopped requiring a decision, pick the next one. That is how this actually happens, and anyone who tells you otherwise has never done it. Now, one honest and gentle word before we close, because I care about you beyond this screen. This video is a reflection on habits and self-worth, offered for encouragement, and it is not professional psychological or financial advice. If you are carrying something heavy right now, if there is a sadness that will not lift, or if you are in a situation where saying no genuinely is not safe, please reach out to someone qualified to help you, a counselor, a doctor, or a trusted person in your life. Some of what I described today assumes a degree of freedom that not every woman currently has, and if that is your situation, please know that it is not a failure of your character. Seeking support is not the opposite of strength. It is one of its clearest expressions. And here is the thought I want you to leave with. The woman who walks into the room and changes it did not get there by being born different from you. She got there by making a series of quiet, unglamorous decisions that nobody witnessed. She said no once and survived it. She sat alone one evening and discovered she was fine. She admitted a mistake out loud and did not die of it. She let a relationship end without chasing it. None of that was visible. All of it was the work. You are almost certainly closer to this than you believe, and the specific habit you already have, the one you were about to dismiss because it comes easily to you, is one that another woman is currently struggling to build. So go down to the comments now and answer the two questions honestly. Which of the 10 do you already have, and which one do you need most? Say them both out loud, where other women can read them. And then read the replies and respond to at least one woman who sounds like you. Tell her what worked, or simply tell her you are standing in the same place. That exchange is worth more than anything I said in this video, because advice from someone who has actually lived it lands in a way that nothing else does. And here is the question I most want people debating down there, because I suspect it splits everyone who watches this. Is saying no something a woman has to learn, or something she had to unlearn being afraid of? In other words, was the ability always there and the fear was installed, or is it a genuine skill that has to be built from nothing? I have my view. I think a lot of you will disagree with me and with each other, and I would love to read that argument. If this gave you something useful, leave a like and share it with a woman who needs to hear that none of this is about being born special. Subscribe with the bell on, and if you would like to support the work directly, consider becoming a member of the channel, because that is genuinely what makes these videos possible. And if you want to go deeper, the next video takes the 10th habit, the one everything else rests on, and goes much further into how to build genuine peace with your own company. It is on the screen now and already waiting for you, so do not close the app on this one. Go straight there while it is still fresh. You do not need to become someone else. You need to stop negotiating with the woman you already are. Take good care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.